go to the assistance of Ambassador Stevens and the others at the other compound, which is called the Special Mission Compound, about a mile away. That delay, they were told to stand down 3 times, and they now have said this publicly, and it'll be announced in the special as well. 3 times told to stand down, stand down, stand down. The 3rd time they said, we're going anyway. They disobeyed orders. They went over there. They saved a bunch of people, but it was too late for Christopher Stevens and Sean Smith, who had died of smoke inhalation. But the 3 guys in the special say, if they had gone immediately, they were kitted up, they were ready to go within 5 minutes of the first gunfire. They were ready to go, and the chief of base would not let them go. They say if he had allowed them to go, Christopher Stevens and Sean Smith would be alive today.
Sorry, is it true that Barack Obama's senior advisor, Barrett, sorry I don't know her first name, acted on behalf of the president to say they couldn't go in?
We don't know that. There's a lot of speculation about the role that Valerie Jarrett plays in the White House. She's obviously a close advisor to the president, but the truth is we just don't know what her role is or was in this episode. All right, let's move on quickly because I've got a lot more to cover here. Both the United States and NATO and eventually the United Nations essentially delivered Libya to Al-Qaeda. I mean, you can see in the news headlines what's going on there now. You see the news about the missing airliners? Yeah. Something like 11 airliners. They don't know where they went, but the Tripoli airport was overrun by jihadis, bad jihadis that was. And the airliners are missing. There's a lot of concern about what those airliners might be used for. They have not yet been able to locate them. But in any case, there, back in 2011, the United States government granted full diplomatic recognition to the rebels mid-year, July 2011. By September, the United Nations General Assembly had given Libya a seat to the rebels. And now, of course, the place is a mess. Here is one of the leadership figures, a Muslim Brotherhood leadership figure. His name is Mustafa Jalil. And here is what he said at the time about their intentions for that revolution. We, as an Islamic state, determine that Islamic law, a major source for legislation, and so forth. Anything that contradicts Islamic law will be considered null and void. What is this in line with? The objectives, the same objectives that every jihadi has. Caliphate and Sharia, and he says it, I mean, he's standing in front of a microphone there, right? And cameras. There should have been warning to our people in Benghazi the very day before September 11. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the head of Al-Qaeda, issued a videotape that went out on jihadi websites, and he, in that videotape, basically called on Libyans. He said, "Oh, sons of Libya, rise up and kill Americans," in revenge for the CIA drone killing of his deputy, a Libyan, whose picture is there, a few months before. That was the green light for the attack on our mission in Benghazi, but I don't know if anybody was paying attention. And so the attack went forward, and it was military, it was coordinated, it was well organized, probably practiced, probably rehearsed, and it used heavy weapons, automatic rifle fire, RPGs, and eventually mortar fire that killed 2 more for the total of 4. The cover-up, I want to talk about the administration, the U.S. administration cover-up that followed this episode, because it's so indicative and so important to what we're talking about, the infiltration of Islamic Sharia principles into our government and our decision-making. So you probably know that there was this hideous little video on YouTube called Innocence of Muslims that in fact did precipitate violent demonstrations and protests in many, many places around the world, including North Africa, Cairo, Tunis, and other places, but not in Libya. There was not one single protest about that video in Libya. That is not by accident. That was commanded. They were told not to demonstrate because why? They were getting ready for something bigger that night, the attack on our mission. But our administration nevertheless seized upon the video to use it not only as an excuse and a cover-up for why the attack happened at our mission in Benghazi, but also I think to further another objective, which is a Sharia objective, and here's how that goes. One of the principal agenda items for the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, that's the logo, you see it there at the bottom. The OIC is the international head of state organization that includes 56 Muslim countries around the world, plus the Palestinians, total of 57 members. And you can go to its website. It's in English, it's in Arabic, it's in French, whatever you like. And there they have their top agenda items, their objectives. And the top agenda item is to achieve the criminalization of the criticism of Islam. That is their number one objective for this period of time that we're in right now. And they are doing that by trying to influence Western legal systems such as ours. And so that is the point I'm trying to make with this video. When our administration said it was the video, well, why would they say that? Because what comes next is the agenda of the OIC. You must not criticize Islam or Muhammad. The video was about Muhammad. By the way, the video is a set of vignettes taken actually from the life of Muhammad, straight out of his biography. Horribly made, terrible low-budget production, but all the same accurate. It comes straight from the Sirat. In any case, we're looking here at Ekmelettin Ihsanoglu. He is the former Secretary General of the OIC. There's a successor now to him this year. But here he is down at the bottom with our former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and they've worked together on something called the Istanbul process, a process which is intended to insinuate Islamic law on slander into the American legal system. Slander in your legal code and in ours has a very specific meaning. And in the American one, it has to be something false, it has to be known to be false, and it has to cause actual damage in order to achieve a conviction of slander in the criminal code of the United States. I expect it is something similar in the Australian legal code, but not so in Islamic law. Under Islamic law, slander, by definition, that book, Reliance of the Traveler that I use, has a chapter on slander. And what it says is slander is anything that a Muslim would find offensive. That means telling the truth, even about Islam, if it is offensive. And of course it's offensive when you get into some of this. It can be a capital crime under Islamic law that compels the death penalty. In any case, this is what they are trying to achieve in our legal system, and they're doing it through mechanisms like that horrible little video from YouTube, Innocence of Muslims. If they can say that video caused violence, the Muslims, they just couldn't control themselves. They saw that, they were so upset, they just had to go on a day of rampage and kill and rape and murder and blow some things up. So 2 weeks after the attack on our mission comes the annual United Nations General Assembly, which always convenes in New York City at the end of September, and there they were this year too, 2012, and one after the other of the OIC heads of state got up to the podium and condemned the video and demanded curbs on free speech. Limit free speech. If you just wouldn't offend us, we wouldn't get upset. Just stop saying these things and we'll be fine. Unfortunately, our president also took the podium, and you can see the yellow highlighter maybe in the back, but I'll read it to you. Here is what our president said when he took his turn at the podium. He said, "The future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam." It's on the whitehouse.gov website if you care to check it out. All right, the only person at that time arrested, the filmmaker. Here he is being led off by the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. Spent a year in jail, ostensibly for parole violations. He wasn't supposed to be on the internet or some such thing. We know what it was really about. All right, let's go now to the rise of the Islamic State or the Caliphate. Again, these are things that are able to be understood in the context of Islam, Islamic doctrine, law, and scripture. If you understand those things, you understand why these things are happening. So let's look at the Caliphate or the Islamic state, grew to power really during the Syrian civil war, although its roots go back much farther than that, to the middle or early to middle 2000s, when it began as Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI, when our troops, and I think some of yours, were over there as a coalition fighting against these militias. And Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who was killed in 2006, headed up AQI for a time before he was killed. Well, this organization grew out of that. So IS is an outgrowth, offshoot of Al-Qaeda. And essentially what we're looking at in the Middle East, all of that said, it is an intra-Islamic sectarian fight. It is between Sunnis and Shiites. It goes back to the time of Muhammad, or right after his death, reportedly in 632, when they could not decide on the succession, and they fought about that. One part, the majority said, well, we should pick the best man from the community, and those were the Sunnis. The others said, no, it's got to be from the house, the family, the bloodline of Muhammad, and they were the minority, and they became the Shiites. In any case, that is what the fundamental basis of the fighting in the Middle East is about. You can see it in Iraq. Certainly we saw it in Syria. Syria is a place where Bashar al-Assad, although he's an Alawite, which is a kind of a very weird offshoot of Shiite Islam, his backer is Iran, the Iranian regime in Tehran, and of course supported, he wouldn't be in power today without the Shiite terror proxy of Iran, Hezbollah. Fighting against them, a motley crew of Sunni militias, most of them affiliated with either Al-Qaeda or the Muslim Brotherhood, or both. What time is it, right? Which day is it? They switch allegiances about that fast. In the beginning, as ISIS, at that time it was called ISIS, ISIS, Islamic State in Iraq and Al-Sham. It was backed by a number of nation states, Qatar, Turkey, the Saudis, even us, United States government, backed them, provided at least limited amounts of weapons to them. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi grew up, of course, an Iraqi. He is Iraqi, although he's not really from Baghdad, as his name tries to imply. He's from Samarra, but he is Iraqi, and he calls himself now the commander of the faithful. He sets himself up to be caliph. He took the name Ibrahim, Caliph Ibrahim. The reason that IS and Baghdadi broke from Al-Qaeda is not because IS was so brutal, so extremist, so radical. Those words don't even mean anything in the context of Islam. What they're doing cannot possibly be called extremist or radical because it is absolutely normative, and it tracks directly to the doctrine, law, and scripture of Islam. You can say, well, they got it all wrong. Well, maybe they did, but that's not the point. If they believe it, and it does track to their documents, that is the enemy threat doctrine. It's not extremist, it's not radical. It is what it is, straight up the middle, orthodox, authoritative. In any case, he was expelled. Baghdadi was expelled by Ayman al-Zawahiri because he was insubordinate. He wouldn't follow orders. Zawahiri told him to confine his activities to Iraq. He said, no, I'm going to be in Syria too. And Zawahiri said, okay, that's it, you're cut off. That was the break. All right, so it grew to strength then in Syria. By earlier this year, it was powerful enough to sweep down out of Syria back into Iraq. Part of its strength comes from the fact that there were so many tribes, Sunnis, tribes, fighters that were willing to join it as it made that sweep down into Iraq. It's not sudden, it's not so inexplicable. These fighters and these tribes were disaffected because of the sectarian rule of Nouri al-Maliki, then Prime Minister of Iraq. So they conquered huge swaths of territory. They conquered a lot of weapons that we, the United States, had given to the Iraqis, but the Iraqi divisions just melted away and fled before them. And they also took over a lot of oil wells, from which they get black market revenue right now, and also have robbed banks. And they also kidnap for ransom and engage in other criminal activities like extortion. Declared the caliphate the first day of Ramadan, which was the end of June this year. The world has really not seen this kind of jihad since the height of the Ottoman Empire. If you know your history, it's not strange, it's not unheard of, but there has been a hiatus, and that hiatus took place because of colonialism. The colonial powers, particularly Britain and the French, kept this down. Then the world wars disrupted everything. The Cold War, all of that's now finished. The Muslim Brotherhood has arisen. Oil has been discovered early 20th century all over the Middle East to fund all this stuff. And the lid's come off, essentially. That's why it's resurgent now. The lid came off. We, the West, were the lid. We took the lid off, and now it's coming back. Part of the reason that the United States, again, has been so ineffective in acknowledging, countering, coming up with a strategy to defeat this organization is because, as you may know, there was a government-wide purge between 2011 and 2012 of all training curriculum in the U.S. government that would deal with Islam truthfully, or make any connection between the inspiration of Islamic doctrine, law, and scripture for Islamic terrorism. All of that was physically removed. The PowerPoints, the presentations, and the instructors. People like me cannot instruct or speak in the U.S. government to students or analysts or anybody else. Here is our then CIA, he's the current CIA director. He was speaking back there in 2011 when he was at our National Security Council. That's our highest, as the title may suggest, a security organization that operates in the White House in the United States. And here he said, he was absolutely mocking Al-Qaeda and jihad. Al-Qaeda's grandiose vision of global domination through a violent Islamic caliphate. That vision is absurd, never going to happen. We haven't heard much from John Brennan of late. Here is the current United States Secretary of Defense. His name is Chuck Hagel. It's panic stations now. I mean, all of a sudden they've glommed onto this stuff, and they are really in a panic. And here's what he said fairly recently. That IS is an imminent threat to everything that, every interest that we have. This is beyond anything we've ever seen. Well, it's beyond anything you've ever seen, Secretary Hagel, because you haven't done your homework. You haven't looked at the history of Islam, the 1,300 plus years of Islamic conquest and jihad. But it is a serious threat, and I don't mean to diminish that. I only mean to say that they are not fully aware of where it comes from. This is why it's a threat. IS has taken territory, it's holding territory, it is governing that territory like an administration, like a government. It is extracting taxes, it is building clinics, it is distributing food to the needy. It is doing everything in the territory it's conquered that a government would do. They are making every effort to look like a government, an Islamic government, a caliphate. They are also immensely attractive. This is another reason why there is such an influx of fighters to IS from all over the world. Success. It is something that draws jihadis who have dreamed of a new caliphate ever since, of course, the last one was abolished. And these guys are their vision of success. They are the ones, they want to be part of this. And so there are thousands of them with Western passports, like Australian, like American, Canadian, European, are absolutely flocking to the Islamic State. Oops, I did it again. All right. But that command to fight is not just, you know, something that Baghdadi dreamed up. Everything he does is calculated to track to Islamic doctrine. And here is a citation from one of the hadiths, hadiths being the sayings, the actions, the collections of the sayings and actions attributed to Muhammad. This is from Sahih al-Bukhari, who is the #1 authoritative collector of hadiths. And he basically said that back then, he quotes Muhammad, that's what the apostle means, Muhammad. He said, "I have been ordered by Allah to fight against the people." It didn't mean just the Arabian, well, it wasn't Arabian then, but peninsula. It didn't just mean the local tribes. This is open-ended. This is forever. To fight against the people until they testify that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and that Muhammad is the apostle